Hello and welcome to episode 364 of the Stacey West podcast. This time you are joined by myself, Charlie, and for the second time in a row, which I think this might be a new for us, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Lamming. Chris, how are we doing, mate?
Hello. Yeah, I think it is a first, isn't it? You and me on back-to-back episodes. Whether that's a positive or negative, I suppose we'll let everyone else decide. Honestly, mate, I'm tired. I had a night out last night at my local, not my local pub, my local function hall in Rugby. Friend of the podcast, Dave. Gary has mentioned our friend Dave a few times, I'm sure. He was part of an organising group who put on a gig last night at our local function hall. Wasn't particularly music I knew or liked, but wanted to support them. And it's the first time I drank any alcohol this year. And I've never been a massive drinker, but I enjoy a beer now and then. And over the course of 6 hours, I had six drinks, which I thought was pretty sensible. And it absolutely ruined me, Charlie. I have been awful all day. So I'm a proper lightweight these days after being pretty much teetotal for, 3 months or so. Was regretting it this morning, I must admit, after trying to be as sensible as possible last night. So that's me away from football. But how are you? Because you've had an interesting day today, haven't you?
I have. Funnily enough, a little bit of it rolls around alcohol, but not much. I had my first drink at about 11 o'clock this morning. I went on an away day. It wasn't just like casually in my house, decided to whip out some whiskey at 11 o'clock in the morning or anything like that. But no, I was down the coast at Torremolinos this morning to go watch my team go and play an away game. Ended up getting there 11 o'clock, half 11 kind of thing, grabbing a beer before the game. Game kicked off at 12. And honestly, it had been raining anyway. And then the heavens just continued to pour. And honestly, this pitch, like I sent videos into the group chat, and I can't even describe how wet it got. It was just like, and I said this to Chris off air, it was like a comedy sketch of what's the wettest football could possibly get to. And they refused to abandon the game at any point. And honestly, the ball was being kicked and the ball wasn't moving. And all that was just coming up was just a load of water around the player's foot whenever he kicked the ball. It was insane. And Chris was like, I bet that must have been a little bit funny though. No, because I was just piss wet through. Like all of my clothes are just in a bundle, went straight in the washing machine as soon as I got back. It was pretty awful. So it's been a pretty long day for me as well on that one. But we're here, we are sat down, and we are ready to talk about the Birmingham City game. Now, granted, it was a little bit easier the other night, Chris, when we were on the podcast together, because we got to talk about a big thumping victory. Now, against Birmingham, that's never going to happen. We know that. But there was still that kind of little bit of, I don't want to say confidence, but that little bit of hope going into the game yesterday, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think that was off the back of multiple factors, really. Tuesday, of course, helped. It kind of got the monkey off our back a little bit. It allowed the pressure release valve a little bit, didn't it, on Tuesday? And we all just felt a little bit better about everything. So yeah, confidence I think was certainly higher. I think there was also the fact that Birmingham lost on Tuesday night as well, so it shows that they are human after all. You don't expect them to lose back-to-back games, but it shows that they are beatable. So that added something else to it. And also stylistically, we mentioned this on Thursday. It does suit us. We are best against teams that want to play football, particularly build from the back, which is, as mentioned before, we haven't played as many of those opponents this season as we expected to, but Birmingham very much are one of those teams. But by far the best at it in League One by quite some margin. But yeah, I think there was a little bit of hope rather than expectation going into the game that, we might be all right here. We'll give a good account of ourselves and hope for a positive result. Of course, as it turned out, we didn't get a positive result, but we got a positive, I think, performance overall. And I think it's kind of what we all expected. But it also, I think, part of that, I think confidence might not be the right word, but element of positivity maybe going into the game was the fact that it felt like a bit of a free hit, really. No one was expecting us to go there and win. No one was really expecting us to go there and draw. So it felt like we could just go and support our team, enjoy the day, and hope for the best, really, without worrying too much about the actual result, which is quite a rare phenomenon in a league game.
Yeah, this is it. Like, it's a league match, and we always want and think that Lincoln City can win any league, but it's a totally different kettle of fish this season when you've got the likes of Birmingham at the top of the league. Their home record is outstanding. We've not won there since 1912, and you kind of sit there and you think about those sorts of stats, and you're like, no matter what we do, it's obviously going to be a massive uphill battle, but actually, those are the moments where Lincoln City can sometimes thrive. That's where we thrived a few times over the last few seasons in League One. So there was always kind of that little thing in the back of the mind of just maybe we can do something here. And let's be honest, we weren't exactly that far off. Now, because you mentioned about expectations in there, and one of the expectations was maybe around the lineup. There wouldn't necessarily be wholesale changes after the performance on Tuesday night. That was the case. There was only 2 changes, with Rico Hackett and Tom Hamer being dropped. Thoughts? Do you think that was fair?
Rico made sense. I thought Rico was really good against Crawley, but Ben Howe's playing in the number 10 role against a team where we knew that they're going to have a hell of a lot of possession. We're going to need to be really good out of possession. Ben House is, as weird as this sounds, arguably better without the ball than he is with it. He's outstanding as a pressing player, an out of possession player, and it showed, by the way, yesterday. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. It kind of justified his selection in that role, so that made sense tactically. Even though I'd have been upset if I was Rico Hackett because he didn't do anything to deserve being dropped. But I think the word dropped is maybe a little bit harsh because it was more tactical for me. It sounded like it wasn't that he'd done anything wrong. And then Jacko and Pordy, of course, playing as the centre back pairing, and I thought before the game started that Tom Hamer would be in with Pordy O'Connor. I thought Tom was absolutely outstanding on Tuesday. I think he really grew into the game, and to get 90 minutes so quickly after coming back from injury, I thought was really, really positive. But maybe in hindsight, the fact that he did play 90 minutes on Tuesday meant that he was probably unlikely to play 90 on Saturday, just because he's, of course, only recently returned from injury. But being brutally honest, I think in the last few weeks, Jacko maybe has struggled at times in some matches. But I actually thought he was outstanding yesterday. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. So completely justified that selection. How about you?
Yeah, look, I very much agree with you on that front. The Tom Hamer one, I wasn't, even when it kind of first got announced, surprised that he wasn't in the starting lineup, purely because I guess even if it was just in my own mind, I kind of put it down to, chances are we can't quite do 180 minutes over the space of 4 days. And that's something that I think we've shown a few times this season, that the club are kind of willing to just slowly return players in rather than rushing them in, which we've seen happen in the past, and then players get immediate knockbacks and are suddenly then out for a few months longer. And that's the last thing we kind of want, or also we don't need to be rushing players in now. We've got the squad depth that if there is one person out for a few weeks, there's no massive difference between them being back in 3 weeks rather than them being back in 4 weeks. So there's no point in trying to rush that, risking a 3 or 4 month injury instead. And then, the Rico one, again, I thought he was outstanding on Tuesday night, but I'm not too surprised, especially against the likes of Birmingham, to have seen a switch in there, especially with it being Ben House coming in. And I just very much want to echo the thoughts on Ben House yesterday. I thought he was close to, if not man of the match yesterday. I thought he was outstanding. We will talk later on about a really strong defensive performance throughout a lot of the game in certain areas. Defending starts at the front. And when you have Ben House in the team, that's exactly what he can give you. Now, he's been bashed a few points this season, has not quite been in the same level of form as he was before kind of his big injury and coming back towards the back end of last year. And I think that's fair enough. He'd probably agree. But in terms of what he was able to do yesterday, I think it kind of just showed exactly why he's still a really important member of the squad, even if he's not getting kind of the 10 to 15 goals to back that up or anything like that. Really impressed with him. Now, again, going into the first half, because they Birmingham started strongly, as I think it's fair to say there was no doubt about it. They had a lot of joy down our left-hand side quite early on, but the minute they tried to get the ball into the area, there was just brick wall after brick wall after brick wall, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was a really good defensive performance from us overall, and yeah, how the game started really kind of epitomised that. Really, Birmingham dominated the ball as we expect them to, dominated territory as you'd expect them to, and they were good. You can't deny it. They were really good on the ball, but they didn't create clear-cut chance after clear-cut chance after clear-cut chance. They had a couple of chances in the first half. George Wickens, by the way, made a really strong save early in the game, deep cross from the left across the right. And he got across really well to tip it over the bar. It was a really good feat to get across quickly, George Wickens. I thought he had a solid game. I think he looked really solid since coming back in from Tuesday night, actually. And also, I don't know, side note for George Wickens, I don't know if he's been doing loads of like quad exercises or something while he's been out injured, because his distribution, he seems to have got like an extra 20 yards on his goal kicks compared to what he used to have, which isn't a bad thing, is it? But yeah, I thought it was a good save. And we said off air, this is actually going to be quite difficult for us to fill a podcast today, because there wasn't a lot to talk about in this game, was there really? There's not really anyone to get angry at or anyone to blame anything on, or not really many contentious decisions or kind of flashpoints in the game. But what I felt we did in the first half is we kind of kept Birmingham at arm's length. A couple of hairy moments, but I think we all went in at halftime feeling pretty satisfied with the situation. I felt the best we could hope for probably was 0-0 at that point, and I'd have delighted with 0-0. Honestly, I can't think of anything else to say about the first half. A couple of big chances for them. Obviously, one good save by Wickens, one poor miss by, I think it was Garner Hickman. And that was it, really. That was kind of it, wasn't
it? Yeah, basically. I think it's probably a little bit fair to say that we maybe grew into the game a little bit over the first half, but not to a huge extent. And to be fair, that's probably more on Birmingham than it is on us, because they go hard quick at the start of the game and then maybe just ease off a little bit, foot off the pedal, and wait again to go in the second half. A little bit like what we did during last season, especially the second half of last season, where we'd give the first 15, 20 minutes at home especially some maximum effort, and then just kind of ease off a little bit.
One thing I'd like to say. Oh, sorry, I thought you'd finished.
No. Please, you go.
I was going to say, because I thought we might be talking about the second half, and there's one thing I've written down here that was worth mentioning from a little tactical point of view. Obviously, we lined up in a 4-2-3-1, as we did on Tuesday night. I expect to see us do that probably for the rest of the season now, to be honest. But we mentioned on the Thursday pod previewing this, how might we try and set up to stop Birmingham? And of course, they lost to Bolton on Tuesday night. So what inspiration could we take from Bolton? And Bolton played a box midfield. So they played a back three with a box midfield, 2 wing backs and 1 up top. And I thought, well, we've found a system that works for us in possession. This 4-2-3-1 clearly is suiting us at the moment, particularly after Tuesday, but in the second half against Barnsley too. So I expect us to keep that. So I thought, well, how might we do it? How might we find a way of kind of getting that extra man in the centre of midfield so that we can counter press really well if we lose the ball, and if we can block the counter attack from Birmingham when they do win it back. And I thought we might see Jeffries tucking in, but what surprised me is we actually saw Tendai Darikwa inverting at times and popping himself in central midfield and letting Jovan keep the width on the right hand side. And difficult to say whether it works or not in terms of specific moments, but sometimes prevention's better than cure, isn't it? So just the fact that there was an extra player in that part of the pitch rather than him being a traditional right back position at times meant that there's less space in the centre of the park, makes it more difficult for Birmingham to kind of break us down. It means they've got to take a longer route, go around the sides. So I thought it was but I wasn't expecting to see it Dorico. I thought we'd find a way of getting an extra person in the midfield. I didn't kind of quite work out how that would happen, but it was Tendai popping in, and I thought that was quite interesting. But Birmingham did counter that really cleverly in the second half, by the way.
Well, let's move on to the second half, because, like you said, there isn't actually much else that we need to talk about in the first half at all. But like you say, at halftime, the mood was very much the same as the first half, from going into the game. Maybe we all started to dream a little bit more that we could very much get something out of the game, like you say, a 0-0, or let's be honest, those scrappy 1-0s that when you are facing a team as strong as, let's say, Birmingham, you kind of dream for. And it seemed as though those opportunities may come to us at some points. But again, there was really no great golden opportunities, especially starting that second half, was there, Chris?
No, it was kind of as you were, really, wasn't it? For that first, 25 minutes until the penalty, which we'll come to talk about in a minute. But it was, kind of as you were in the second half, as it was pretty much all the way through the first. Again, good possession by Birmingham. They moved us around really well. But again, didn't really have a huge number of real clear-cut opportunities, though they did start to put some real pressure on us leading up to the goal about sort of 5-10 minutes before that. They really did start to increase the pressure. And that came off the back of Keshi Anderson coming on. So this is really smart managerial change from Chris Davis, because I think it was unpredictable that it would be Tendai that would be inverting to create that extra man. What that means is it's someone who normally has to defend on the right-hand side of the pitch, but when we are in possession, we'll tuck in. Now, in transition, of course, that means he's got to go from the centre back to his right-back position, and that creates distance. With, I think it was Emil Hansen originally on that left side, tending to drift inside. It kind of cancelled each other out, and it worked well for us. And what happened is Keshi Anderson came on the left and basically just stood on the touchline. He really held the width, didn't go like looking for the ball, kind of waited for the ball to come to him. And that just created space for Birmingham to find more passes. They got down our right-hand side 2 or 3 times off the back of that change. I thought Keshi Anderson himself had a good game when he came on, but it was more the tactical change that meant that on our side where our right-back was inverting, he couldn't do that as easily now, which meant one of two things was going to happen. Number one, Keshi Anderson was going to receive the ball in loads of space, which it wouldn't be ideal, or Tendai now has to stay wider, which creates more space in the middle of the pitch. It basically just not completely undid our defensive shape, but it gave Birmingham an advantage that they didn't have up until that point. And they had a real spell of pressure for about kind of 4 or 5 minutes, really, which we defended quite well. I have to say, we threw 3 bodies on the line. Probably the first time in the match we really had to, be kind of last ditch in our defending. And then it felt like, sigh of relief, because it felt like it was the Alamo for about 5 minutes, didn't it? And then things calmed down again. And then in the 70th minute, Birmingham City received a penalty, which in immediate viewing, I didn't think it was. Upon watching the first replay, it is a penalty. It is a penalty, in my opinion. I don't think it's even soft. I think it just is. If that's in the other end, you're screaming and shouting, expecting that to be given, not hoping. So unfortunate, but I think it was probably correct. What do you think?
I screamed at my TV the minute that penalty was given. I screamed because I'm not a chance, not a chance is that a penalty. And I messaged a friend of mine saying, basically just ranting. I didn't even watch the penalty. I just couldn't. I didn't watch it. I just stood up. I looked away. Because to be fair, I sort of knew. I'm thinking, that's just the one chance they need now, and that's it. And I saw that
Wickens had a couple of opportunities to save penalties this season, hasn't he? So I had a little bit of hope in the back of my mind that he might make the save. Something that was quite interesting, actually, is I can't remember who it was that took the penalty in the end. Actually, who was it? It was Dow, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah.
But Dow isn't Birmingham's regular penalty taker, I believe. And there was a little clip online of George Wickens looking over to the bench because it was like, we haven't planned for this. Where's he going to put it? Because I know where Alfie May is going to put it, etc. It was quite funny. So he had to rely on pure instinct, and sadly, it went in. Good pen. But like I said, it was a penalty, wasn't it?
No, it was a pen. I very much backtracked. Although I was screaming and shouting and ranting at the time, and like I said, I messaged a friend saying, not a chance this penalty, all of this. I saw that same friend today, and he goes, "Oh, so what happened yesterday in your game then? Not a pen, no?" I said, "No. I take everything back. It was definitely a penalty. Like I was just in a mood about it. But it's a shame, and it's not one of those that I think it's not anything that we can really blame Sam Lucas for either. It was just kind of one of those comings together. The Birmingham player was simply quicker to the ball. To be fair, we've got a Birmingham fan in today watching the podcast, and he just very much agrees. Iwata is just quicker and first to the ball, and that is what did it for Sam Lucas. And I think that's very fair. It's a shame, but there's not really that much else that we could do about that. Anywhere else on the pitch, it's a definite foul, so it should be a penalty. That's the mantra I always need to go by with penalties when they're for us. So I can't then be a hypocrite and try and change my tune on that when those do fall against us, unfortunately. But at that point, Chris, 1-0, pretty much resigned to losing the game, weren't we? As kind of little as we ever want to be, up until, for me, the 90th minute, and some of those corners started coming in.
Yeah. I think we had a good old go after the goal.
Yeah,
I thought we'd lose once it went to 1-0. I thought our best chance of getting anything out of the game would be 0-0 or maybe a cheeky 1-0. But realistically, as soon as Birmingham take the lead, I didn't expect us to get anything from the game. But you know what? Going into this game, we all hoped we'd get something, but with some of the uncertainty that's been going on the pitch and consistency recently, we mentioned this on Thursday as well, didn't we? I think most of us would have been quite happy with a narrow defeat and a battling performance, and that is what we had. Just interesting. Just saw you flash that up by Birmingham fan John here. That's interesting. I didn't realise that would be the reason why. That's very obvious. Now you come to say it. So he mentioned that Stansfield is Birmingham's regular penalty taker, but he was also at Fulham at the same time that George Wickens was at Fulham. So thought that Wickens may well have an idea of where Stansfield likes to put his penalties, so that's why he gave it to Dowell. That's really, firstly, just good team play. It's just clever, isn't it? It's clever, and I think you can sometimes say a lot about technical ability and tactical nous, and what do the best players, what makes them the best players, what are they actually better at? Sometimes it's just about making the right decision in the moment for the situation in the match, isn't it? And that's a pure example of that. So frustrating, but fair play. You can't really criticize that, can you? But then from then, I thought we responded pretty well. That last 20 minutes or so of the match, we had the majority of our shots and chances, and territory came there. Made a couple of changes. I think Joe Gardner had another good. Impressive cameo. I can't talk. What's wrong with me? That's probably the hangover. Let's be honest. For a podcast, that, isn't it? No, not ideal. It's like we said at the start. It's really difficult to criticize anything here. It's really difficult to analyze because it was exactly what most of us expected, albeit Jesus Christ, what's wrong with today? A small moment of anger when the penalty was given upon realization 20 seconds later, seeing the replay. We can't even blame that. That was the right decision. And then we had a good go until the end of the game. Birmingham, maybe I wouldn't say we were on the ropes. It was nowhere near there, but we had 2 or 3 chances. I would say the biggest chance, by the way, was, in fact, I think it's the only Lincoln City chance that made the highlights, was Rico's chance right at the very end. So a rare Ryan Allsop, poor clearance after, I think it was Freddie, possibly, that was in his way. He kind of pushes the rules a little bit there in terms of what's going on for stopping the goalkeepers releasing the ball. But it did kind of get in his head towards the end of the game. Slightly misplaced and mishit clearance by Allsop. And we had a counter-attack. Freddie eventually got to Fred, flicked it on through for Rico. And I thought, here we go. This is the chance. This is the one chance that we're going to get in the game. And Rico didn't really seem to commit to the shot, did he? It kind of just trickled wide. And that was kind of that.
I'll be honest. I thought the one chance that we were going to get after that was going to be, like I said, those corners in stoppage time. When George Wickens came up, they were some good corners and they were going into the right areas and there were so many bodies in there. All that was going through my mind was just, if it just fell kindly for literally anyone, it could have even been George Wickens at that point. Somebody just to put it in the back of the net. But again, you know what? Fair play to Birmingham for kind of resolute defending in that point. And you know what? We all, as League One fans, really envy Birmingham this year. And that's also a bit of a sign of respect.
Mm.
Because, yes, okay, they've spent a lot of money. You know, what you can say, whatever with that. Do you know what? They're good at what they do. We've already spoken about some of the little moments that they just do really correctly. Tactically, they set up well. They make the changes that they need to make. And obviously, it's much better when you've got the personnel to be able to do that. But you also can't take away from, decision-making isn't bought. Decision-making is, it's understood. It's made through the kind of the whole level of management and top-down approaches and a real group mentality. Of course, again, it's easier to implement that when you're doing things well and when you've got absolute consummate professionals who maybe have and should still be playing higher. But again, fair play to Birmingham. I thought we put in a really good performance. I walked away yesterday. I wasn't angry at any point. Okay, in the moment of the penalty, absolutely. But after that, walked away, head held high. And, fair play to Birmingham. Fair play to Lincoln for putting on the performance that we did. On to next week. There's really not much else that we can really put into that, is there, Chris? And it's difficult when we come onto a podcast and try and then analyse it for half an hour. Because there's not actually that much to discuss with it.
Yeah. And there's not much to discuss because it was bad either. It was just, it kind of evened out a little bit and the correct result happened. What I would say is that I'm feeling a little bit dirty in regards to being so kind of positive and praising an opposition. I think we ought to stop that because it doesn't feel right. But I think it just goes to show Birmingham by far the best team in League One. But the thing is, what we'll say on this is it still felt different because we've had big teams in League One before. We've had Sunderland, we've had Ipswich, we've had Derby, etc. No one's felt as dominant as Birmingham have.
No,
and I've gone into all those other games feeling we could get something out of them, feeling that it is a league game and it was a nice indication of how far we've come as a football club, that we're on a level playing field with these clubs. But it felt like a league game. But Birmingham didn't. It didn't feel like a league game yesterday. It felt like a cup game. It was weird. Because of that, you kind of come out of it and you're not too worried. There was nothing to worry about. There was no talking points that makes us put question marks over players. It wasn't really a breakout performance like there have been like Joe Gardner recently, for example. It was just a game that happened and the result was fair, albeit if the penalty wasn't given, I don't know if Birmingham would have broken us down. I think we could have been good for a 0-0, but they did get the pen. They probably deserved to win the game on the balance. That was it.
1-0. Finished. I echo everything you just said there. And look, moving away from that game as well, there was another side who I think people expected to be not quite as dominant, but also a little bit dominant in League One this season. Huddersfield Town.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, I'm sure you saw the news this morning.
Indeed.
They've decided to sack Michael Duff. Now, first of all, I think he's a really good manager, regardless of kind of this decision or anything like that. Sat in 7th place in the league. Immediate thoughts when that news came through, Chris. What were they for you?
Honestly, immediate thoughts were that's mental. What are they doing? That's just typical football. Typical owners throwing loads of money at it without really understanding of the bigger picture of the league they're in. Knee jerk. All the maybe expected reactions I think from most League One fans looking at that would be, what the hell are they doing? That's mad. However, I'm not saying it's the right decision. I don't like to see managers lose their jobs at all, particularly with this at this point in the season when they're still so close to being in the playoffs. But in terms of their results, they're on a pretty poor run. They've only won 5 games in their last 16. They've lost 7 of them. So I think it's 19 points from 16 matches. That's obviously not promotion form at all. So it's clearly something going wrong at Huddersfield in that regard. And then they beat Cambridge 4-0 on the 20th of December. And then every single match of 16 matches since then, as mentioned, they've won 5, drawn 4, lost 7. But what I found particularly interesting is that every single one of those matches was separated by no more than 1 goal either way. So it was either a draw or it was a 1-0 win or a 1-goal win or a 1-goal defeat. So all of their games are clearly very, very tight. So I don't know if, it depends glass half full, glass half empty, doesn't it? It means, well, you're not getting blown out the water by anybody. You're competitive in every single match and maybe there's elements of not taking chances, etc. But also, if you're investing the amount of money that Huddersfield have done this season, maybe you do expect to be a bit more dominant than just one goal games. So, yeah, it took me by surprise. What about you?
Initially, I was a little bit shocked when I heard the news. However, the more that and by the way, when I first heard that news, I then looked at the table, realised they were in 7th, thought that they were still kind of hanging around 4th-ish, saw that they were in 7th, and thought, actually, I'm not that shocked. Expectations for a team like Huddersfield this season were always going to be very, very high. They were going to be basically get straight back up to the Championship. They spent the money to do what they thought anyway would get them straight back up to the Championship. At the minute, they're not performing. The results aren't there. Another loss yesterday, only 1 win in the last 5. And also, I think there's still enough time left of the season just to be able to turn it around and properly get yourself pushed back up into kind of those 4th, 5th slots so that you're not kind of looking over your shoulder in the playoffs on the last day of the season. So I'm actually not as shocked then when I kind of look into all of that. Do I think they made the right decision? Obviously, you can only really judge that with hindsight at the end of the year, can't you? Depends who they bring in and what they do. I heard Mark Kennedy's free, so can always bring him if they want. I don't think it's as much of a surprise as it was kind of in that first minute when I first heard the news. But again, it kind of showed the ludicrousy of League One and managerial sackings. Now, Chris, I am going to kind of just say the elephant in the room here. That record of 5 wins in the last, was it 16 games, something like that? Almost the same sort of record that Michael Skubala has with Lincoln City at the moment.
Yeah, true.
Again, elephant in the room. Do we think that Huddersfield are simply just more trigger happy than Lincoln? Do we think that it's because expectations are higher? Like, why is it? And of course, it's very difficult to compare club to club, but why is it maybe that one is treated a little bit more favourably than the other, do you think?
Multiple reasons. To answer your question, yes and yes to both of those statements that you mentioned, though. Are they more trigger happy? Clearly, they have been quite so over the last few years. But also expectations. You see, our expectations are probably where we are. We'd all like to be higher in the league, but I think the realization, again, we got through the whole of the podcast last week without saying the word budget, but budget's come back up now. We all want to be in the playoffs. We all want to be pushing above that, but we know we have to punch above our weight to be able to get there. And this season, how far we have to punch above our weight is, never happened before. So, I think realistically speaking, what we want to see now is an improvement in regard to consistency on the pitch, performances and points calls. But I don't think we have the expectation to be playoff chasing right now, whereas Huddersfield do. And they spent £3 million on a centre forward in January. Like that's a lot of pennies, isn't it? And you don't do that unless you think that you're going to get value for that by getting promoted again. And if the manager is not performing, then, or not getting his team to perform, should I say, then you can understand it. What I will say, by the way, just quickly on Joe Taylor, he's made 2 starts, 3 appearances from the bench, and he's scored a single goal, which was in his first match. And that's it so far for Huddersfield Town. So it's hardly gone too well. And he mentioned at the start of the podcast about Tom Hamer, actually, in terms of bringing players in gradually and slowly, because you don't want them to re-injure themselves. Joe Taylor was thrown into it in the deep end, was re-injured because he wasn't, match fit after basically hardly playing football for 6 months. And they haven't had value for that huge sum that they played on the pitch because they rushed him. And I think sometimes hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Sometimes we criticize the club in terms of why is so-and-so not playing? Why is he rested? They get paid to run around for 90 minutes, blah, blah, blah. But actually what it goes to show is if you don't do that, it can come back and bite you, because if you spent £3 million in the January and you can't use that player, that's quite a big hole, isn't it? So, we're not a Huddersfield Town podcast, but it was League One news, and we thought it was an interesting discussion point, if nothing else, particularly because the records are quite similar between Duff and Skubala over the last kind of 15, 16 game period. But I think the situations are completely different, and I don't think there was ever really any, certainly internal pressure on Michael Skubala.
No, 100%. And I would hope that there wasn't much external, even though, of course, there is always some noise. But I guess you get that anywhere, anytime when there is a loss or a bad kind of run of form. But yeah, Michael Duff sacked from Huddersfield. And like I say, we just wanted to kind of have a quick discussion about that with it being other League One news. So what we're going to do is we are going to go for a quick advert break now. We'll say a quick hello to YouTube. So if you are listening to this on Spotify, the Apple Podcasts, I don't know any other type of podcasting platforms, you tell us. And next time you want to come and have a watch of us and see our faces, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but if you do, make sure to come and have a look over on YouTube. But until we are back from the ad break, we will see you in a moment.
And hello, YouTube. Thank you for checking in this evening.
Hello, everybody on YouTube. We have had plenty of people in. In fact, there's 44 people watching at the moment. We have got Andy Brown, Flossy Tops, very much regulars, both of them. We have Blake Hutchinson, John Rooston, Harry Jackson, John Morell, who obviously we have heard from a few times this evening, our Birmingham City fan watching along, Gaz Nicholson, Evening All, Sue Imp, who I popped one of your messages up a second ago as well. There are plenty of you in. Hope you are all well. Oh gosh, I feel like I'm losing my voice, which halfway through a podcast is not a good idea, is it, Chris?
Not ideal at all. I saw that message by Sue there, and for those people that maybe haven't quite seen it, she popped that Alex Mitchell is not playing at Charlton. Would have him back in a heartbeat. I'm sure you'd have him back, wouldn't you, Charlie? He broke your heart.
No, I wouldn't. Nah, get him gone. I couldn't stand him back now. That's it. He chose them over us. No, he's not playing at the moment. I don't believe there's an injury in that, to be fair. But anyway, who knows with that one. But yeah, no, there's been some good questions. We've got one here. JR Special saying Cowley in the frame for the Huddersfield job. I can't personally see it, although maybe their good run at Colchester could be happening just at the right time. To be fair, I don't think they ever should have got sacked from Huddersfield the first time round. They'd
agreed.
If you just took the table from their time, from the moment they joined up until the end of the season, I think they were 12th in the league, if I remember correctly. So it was actually a really, really good showing from them, but somehow got sacked for that. There was also another comment, just as we were talking about the George Wickens and Jay Stansfield connection earlier on. There we go. John also stated it wasn't even, the manager didn't even know about that link, and it was all Stansfield's doing, letting Kieran Dowell take the penalty. Again, like that's fair play to have him making a decision like that.
Right. Shall we crack on with part 2?
Oh, absolutely, we shall. We have got a few questions that we are going to answer. So,
and one piece of news in terms of wider football, yes,
which we're going to start on as well. Okay. Hello, welcome back. Thank you to the sponsors, whoever they are this week. Again, we have no idea who they are. We just get told after the fact. In fact, we don't even get told after the fact. You do when you listen to it. I don't actually listen back. I don't know about you, Chris.
No, I can't stand listening to my own voice.
No, neither. It's one of the worst things ever. If you ever have to like edit any of the podcasts or anything like that, it's snipping out the tiniest little bit just to make sure you don't actually hear your own voice. Not the most enjoyable. Anyway, we have got a few Patreon questions that we are going to answer, but there is one thing that we need to touch on beforehand, because news came out, I think it was about a week ago now, that there was going to be a potential new rule introduced by FIFA, which I believe got passed for next season. Chris, as a member of the goalkeeper union, you'll be obviously very interested to discuss this one. So now goalkeepers are going to have 8 seconds to release the ball, or else it's going to be a corner for the opposition. Immediate thoughts on it, Chris?
I like it. Yeah, I like it, because I think the immediate question that someone asked me when I mentioned this last night actually was, isn't there already a rule for this? And the answer is yes, there is. It's currently 6 seconds, and that rule is never, ever, ever upheld in any way, shape, or form. And in the very, very rare occasions when you see it given, it's because the goalkeeper has absolutely taken the Michael and maybe had the ball in his hand for 20, 30, 40 seconds. And it's so rare that you see it, and that currently results in an indirect free kick, of course. So that's the big change, isn't it? Is that it's clearly going to be upheld now. And what's going to happen is after 3 seconds has passed, the referee will then do like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown with his hands to kind of signal that the keeper has a time limit that they have to release the ball in. So the idea behind this, of course, is to stop time wasting, is to speed the game up. And I'm all for that, of course. I suppose the wider question for this, though, is this the start of maybe a few more things like this potentially coming in, particularly off like throw-ins, for example? And I remember when we played against, we played at home against before Crawley, Burton, wasn't it? When we lost 1-0, and one of their they took multiple throw-ins for ages, and because they were taking ages, me and Joe started timing them, and it took over 40 seconds for a couple of the throw-ins to be taken in the second half, and it's just so much time, isn't it? So if the ball's in play more often, there's less time available for time wasting, or if it's a more reasonable way of managing time wasting because there's rules upheld rather than simply asking a player politely to hurry up and then booking them on 85 minutes when it's pointless by that point anyway. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting, and I'm actually all for it. I think it could potentially be a useful way of speeding the game up. But I think you'll see a few goalkeepers falling foul of it early in the season before everyone gets used to it. So you might see, a few extra set piece goals early in the season because teams are maybe going to get more corners than they would normally get. So yeah, you'll be interesting to observe, if nothing else.
Yeah, do you know what? I don't like the fact that it's a corner. That just seems a little bit odd to me. Like I understand that there has to be a punishment. It being a corner just seems a little bit like, it feels like it's an archaic law that is being brought back to life, which in a way it sort of is. But you hear like some of these weird rules that could result in things like corners. But I don't know, it just seems a little bit strange that it's going to be a corner rather than anything like an indirect free kick or something.
Yeah, I get that. Indirect free kicks are always really fun, aren't they? Because they're so rare. Yeah. They're always really fun. But I think, is that maybe too much of a... Because they're really strong goal stroke opportunities, aren't they? Yeah. And is that maybe too big of a punishment? Yeah. But the goalkeeper keeping hold of the ball in his hands for a couple of seconds too long. I think an indirect free kick is probably a little bit harsh, particularly if it is now actually going to be enforced. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And remember when the rule came in about goal kicks and you no longer had to, the ball didn't have to exit the 18-yard box, so you could pass your play within it. And it took a little bit of time for everyone to get used to it and work out how to make the most of that rule. Yeah. But it was just really interesting to see how teams did it, how teams kind of set up, because there's a whole knock-on effect here. If the goalkeeper's got to release the ball, then how you play out or how quickly you get into position to receive and where you receive that playing out or that delivery from the keeper, that's going to all change. That next 8 seconds once the goalkeeper gets the ball, it's not just the keeper that's going to impact. It's going to impact everybody on both teams. So that's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that.
You mentioned about the potential kind of knock-on effect, and is this sort of the start of, I'm going to say slippery slope, that immediately kind of has the connotations of negatives. I'm not necessarily saying that, but the start of kind of a slippery slope of having a lot more rules being brought in to speed up things like throw-ins. Do you not think that this is also an admission in a way, kind of an implied admission that their last rule on trying to stop time wasting, which was we're going to just add literally everything else on at the end of the game now, that didn't actually go as well as what they thought it would do? Because bearing in mind, 2 years ago, we were having, especially for the first few months of the season, we were getting added time of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 minutes as standard. That wasn't like just because of some long injury or something. Now you don't really see that anymore, and I don't necessarily think the time wasting side of it has changed as much. Now, again, I'd be very interested to see the stats that come out of this. I know the EFL always release it at the end of the season about how long the ball has been in play over the course of the whole year for League One, Championship, League Two. So, of course, it'll be interesting to see, actually, has there been much of a change? But it doesn't feel like it's sat in the stands watching the games that it has kind of sped up. So, and then they sort of backtracked on that a little bit, like not officially, but they kind of went back and, those aren't really being added on quite as much, and the referees will be told that they need to just rein it in a little bit. Again, is it kind of just an admission that wasn't the right way to do it and they were wrong and now they're trying something else?
Yeah, I think so. You know what? Well, I understand the criticism of adding all the time at the end. If it doesn't help the game in the moment, does it? It doesn't help the speed of the game. It just means that there's more time available at the end. So it doesn't help on the attacks or anything. But at least the time's there so that you can play football and you have the opportunity to build a new attack, for example. And when that rule first came in, like you say, it was quite extreme. You saw lots and lots of time added on. Quite fun. I quite liked it personally.
Yeah, I did.
But also that also coincided with lots more bookings for time wasting earlier in the game. It was something that they really wanted to clamp down on, and it kind of worked to an extent, I think. And I understand some of the negatives, but what we're seeing, particularly this season, is there's no more time being added on than there ever used to be. Time wasting isn't being punished at all, or if it is, it's until it's in the 85th minute, by which point it's completely pointless for that player to be in a booking. Teams are getting clever with that, though, by the way. The amount of times that you'll see a player walk over to take the throw in, and then they'll pass it to another player, and then they'll pass it to the person that's actually going to take the throw in, because the ref can't book all three of them, can he? So if none of them, if no individual player is responsible for the time wasting, you can't book any of them. So you'll see that quite this season. Whenever that rule comes in, teams will always find a way around it. But what's happening this season has particularly frustrated me because it feels like nothing's been enforced at all. Nothing's been done about it. So if this is something that's going to help in the moment and keep the game moving quicker, actually in real time without kind of adding up at the end and it stops things going too slowly in the moment, I think that can only be a positive. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to this. I think it'll be good. I can't see any negatives personally.
No, I think that's fair. I'm just always a little dubious about rule changes in football. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to this. And again, I was having a conversation today, actually, about things like one-on-one penalties and how fun could they be? Little things like that. I just don't want the game to be messed with too much. Little changes are one thing, but I just don't want it to start being like an extra corner every time the goalkeeper has the ball. And for the start, I guarantee that's what it will be. And then it'll have to, then it will be reined in because clubs are going to, and goalkeepers specifically are going to know how to combat that. I'm also, like, as much as I want to stop time wasted, I feel it's a little harsh on goalkeepers sometimes because they're getting booked, for example, or in this case now they could be giving away a corner because they've not gone quick enough when their teammates might not be in the position in time. And then that's the knock-on effect, isn't it? If they just boot it, they're going to get blasted by fans for having poor distribution. So again, it's going to very much be a kind of a harsh learning curve quite quickly, which again will probably be quite fun to see. But it's going to be an interesting one with that one. And I definitely think it's one that doesn't help goalkeepers in any way. But
no, it doesn't. It doesn't, not directly at all. But I still like it. I still like it because of exciting, and it's not because of the goalkeepers. It's that knock-on effect that you just mentioned there. It's if they've only got 8 seconds to release it, that time's ticking down. There's no one to throw the ball to or roll it to. You're going to have to launch it, and you might have to launch it when there's no one up top of the pitch. But what's the learning off the back of that? Well, you might leave more players forward when you're defending, in the hope that you can have a quick transition over the top. Maybe you'll see defenders, maybe more people dropping back to receive the ball quicker, and then the opposition into their pressing shape when the keeper has the ball. How they're going to do that for that 8 seconds? Like, I think there's going to be quite a big change at the back of this, of what feels like quite a small change. And I get your point though, in terms of messing around with rules. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there is something broken in regards to time wasting, isn't there? So I think this could help fix it. And if nothing else, it'll be fun for a little bit until they abandon it in a year's time when it just stops getting enforced like the last one did.
Yeah, basically. But let's enjoy the fun whilst it is there and something a little bit different for a little bit. Absolutely. Now, we have got a few questions that we're going to finish the podcast on today that came in through the Patreon Discord, as is becoming a bit of a regular segment now, actually, on the podcast, which is always quite good. We do enjoy hearing from you guys to see what you would like us what you'd like us to answer, really. So, Chris, I'm going to throw a few over to you. First of all, we're going to talk about a player who we have already spoken about today, Ben House, who had excellent work rate yesterday, and I very much agree with that. The question is, where does he fit in going forward? Is there a role for him in this side and in the side with Lincoln City overall?
You know what, mate? I heard all of that question. Apart from the player you're talking about, it kind of broke up my end. So who are we talking about? Oh, right, Ben House. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because Ben House, I think this time last year, would be irreplaceable. I don't think there are any better centre forwards in League One without possession of the football. And that isn't a criticism of his in-possession play. I think he's so good without the ball, so intelligent and so aggressive with his pressing. But we do have other options in the team now in that role, and maybe part of the reason he felt irreplaceable is we didn't really have many other viable options in that centre forward position. And of course, he's more recently been playing elsewhere. He hasn't really been playing up front. Even when we've been playing two up front in a 3-5-2, he's often played in behind the striker or in one of the eights. And of course, yesterday he played in the 10 role. He came on Tuesday night at right wing. So yeah, maybe he's less kind of guaranteed that centre forward's role than he was a season or so ago. I personally still think there is a role for Ben at Lincoln City. I think his skill set is very unique, and it's a sort of thing that I think is appreciated a lot more by managers than it sometimes is by fans, because as supporters, we pay a lot more attention when your team has the ball and when players have the ball than when you don't. But that is only half of the game. And you only have the ball itself for about 3 minutes. Each individual player only has the ball about 3 minutes on average in each match. But they're not stood there doing nothing for 87, are they? They're impacting the game in many ways, even when they don't have the ball at their feet. And I think Ben's skill set is in those 87 minutes, to be honest. And I think we always look a more solid team with Ben House in it, albeit maybe this season haven't looked as threatening at times with him in it as well. So personally, do I think there's a role for him? Yes. Do I think he's guaranteed to be one of the first names on the team sheet, like he maybe has been over the last couple of years? Maybe not. Maybe not so. But I think I would be reluctant to release Ben. Obviously, Jez mentioned that there are options on many of the contracts for players who are currently out of contract at the end of the season. We don't know who those players are that have options and don't. But if there is an option to extend Ben House's deal, I think it makes sense to do so, even if it maybe means he's not a guaranteed starter. I think he's definitely got some real value to add to the squad still.
I think if Ben House leaves us, he could quite easily go to another top-end League One side and thrive. And honestly, purely out of spite, I don't want him to go for that reason, because I don't want another club to have him. Again, I think he's got like such a certain skill set that for a player in his position and kind of his age as well, bearing in mind he's still not exactly one of the older players in the team. That for that, I just think you want one of those in your squad, and he is an invaluable part of the squad for that. And I agree with you. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a guaranteed start week in, week out. I don't really think we should have too many players that are like that. There's always going to be one or two down the spine of the pitch. Absolutely. Ethan, when he's fit, he's in. Pordy, when he's fit, he's in. But again, I think having Ben House as a member of the squad, it makes our squad better. And that's all I want. I want us to have the best possible Lincoln City squad. And I think he's a part of what our best possible Lincoln City squad is at the moment and going into next season. Now, talking about the rest of the squad as well, another question came in regarding 4 different players. So there might be 4 different answers from you here, Chris. Rob Street, Jay Ben, Ashin Gallagher, Zach Bradshaw. Do we think they're going to be involved with the first team next season? Is your answer mixed for all 4 here, or have you got kind of one blanket answer?
Yeah, it's mixed. I think that's probably not surprising. Rob Street, his loan has achieved so far exactly what all parties wanted it to achieve. There's a reason he was brought in on a 4-year deal as part of a strike force that was already kind of 4 or 5 strong at that point. Nobody, I think, expected Rob Street to be a guaranteed starter in our team this season. He got brought in on a 4-year deal because we saw potential there. Of course, you don't know what happens because players get injured. Obviously, Tyler has done. We haven't seen Tyler Walker. Let's not forget he still plays for us, by the way, in case you've forgotten. I'd forgotten briefly. But we've obviously got, particularly with James Collins coming in, we have options up there now. And Rob, didn't really seem to get much of an opportunity, but also when we did see him, didn't have a huge amount, I suppose, that would show that he deserved to be playing in the league. albeit you can't judge a player off just the handful of appearances we saw in the trophy. But he didn't go out on loan to Doncaster because he failed this first half of the season. He went there because it was right for literally everybody. It's right for him to go and play. It was clearly right for Doncaster because they wanted a player of his profile. And it's right for us because we've got a player who we believe in, who has signed on a long-term deal because we didn't expect him to be the finished article yet, but we think he could be really valuable in the future, to go out and play some games. And he's gone out and played some games and scored shitloads of goals. He scored 7 goals now. 7 goals since January, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He scored more goals than anyone else in our team has, and he's scored them in
over the course of the whole season.
Yeah, exactly, and he's scored them in a couple of months. Obviously, you're playing a league below, but he's performing really strongly. So I really expect Rob Street to come back and be part of our team next season, because I feel like, providing that he doesn't get injured and he continues on his form as he is now, he could finish the season with 10, 12 goals. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And a confident centre forward as well. It's not just a player with a certain skill set, but it's the confidence that he has as well. And I suppose a little bit of a contradiction to my previous point about Ben House. It does have quite a similar style to Ben in that regard. So I don't know if this is the case, by the way, but I'm wondering, was Rob brought in because we saw just generally potential in him and he had skill set that suits the Lincoln City team, or did we bring him in as a potential rival and or potential replacement for Ben House because of his profile that's similar? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's interesting to discuss. But yeah, I think Rob Street definitely will be involved, and JJ McKinnon will as well. Then the other 3, Oshim was doing so well, but of course picked up an injury and hasn't played much football since joining Boston. So I don't know about him. Maybe another loan for him would make sense, but it depends on what the manager and the coaching staff see in pre-season. And then the other 2 probably less confident with. So I believe Jay Ben is out of contract at the end of the season, but he's one player that we do have an option on. So it'll be interesting to see, just for all parties really, how that works, because as much as he's not far away, Bradford isn't a million miles away. He's right next door to Halifax, which is where we signed him from. He's clearly from that part of the country, and there's a location element playing there as well as a league element. And also, let's not forget, Bradford could potentially go up this season through the playoffs, or even automatically still, I think, couldn't they? And they might want to keep him, and there might be a deal to be done there. And then Zach Bradshaw, he's been playing in an incredibly struggling team, hasn't he? Tranmere have had a really, really, really poor season. And what happens when you're having a poor season, of course, is you're searching for that formula that works. So there's lots of chopping, lots of changing in terms of personnel, tactics, styles, etc. And he hasn't really had a fair crack of the whip there. So I'm not sure we'll see too much of Zach Bradshaw in the Lincoln City team next season. It might be another loan for him. But there's still, 10 games left this year and a whole pre-season. So, yeah, maybe that's a different answer for each player. But that's my thoughts. What are yours?
Rob Street, I very much agree with. He's going to come back as a striker in form, in confidence, and he's going to probably want to be fighting for a starting slot in League One, as he has every right to do after the performances that he's putting in Doncaster. It'd be interesting to see kind of how we play the transfer market in the summer as well in terms of strikers. And kind of from there, it will very much depend on what kind of happens with Rob Street, but he'll definitely be playing a part, I would imagine. Oisin Gallagher, again, I feel like I really want him to play a part at some point. I would love right now if the club announced a 5-year deal for Oisin, because I feel like every year we're saying soon, almost, but not quite, in terms of is he going to be involved in the first team. So I would probably agree, probably another loan out there. I think the jump from maybe where he is now in kind of National League up to League One is probably quite big at the minute. So I think it's fair enough that something like that is probably then one more kind of bridging loan away at the kind of minimum in that, as much as we do really want to see someone like him get involved as quickly as possible. Zach Bradshaw, again, he's not really been able to show what he can do so far at Tranmere, has he? So another loan, I would suspect, would be the case there. Now, Jay Ben, I have a feeling that Jay Ben's loan was an exit loan. So one of those where we let them go out for the year, play some football, see what they can do. And and then probably let go at the end of the year, a little bit like, bearing in mind, Ali Smith is technically still a Lincoln City player.
Yeah, about him.
Yeah. So I imagine it might be something somewhat similar to that kind of situation. Again, don't know, but that's kind of how I'm reading into the J Ben one, which again is a shame. But we can only have a squad of 25, 30 players. As nice as it would be to have all of these players go out on loan and come back, the better players and then be fully ready. Doesn't always work like that, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on the 4. Now, there was one last question that we are going to answer on here regarding the squad for next season. Chris, let me give you a hypothetical that might be a reality that we probably don't want to admit. Bordy O'Connor leaves in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Who's our captain next year?
Good question. Tendai.
Yeah, agreed.
Good. That was quick, wasn't it?
Literally, he just seems like the best option for it. The way that he immediately just puts his arm around players for anything, and he seems to have this real good connection with a lot of the lads in the squad, which I love. I love to see that, especially from a player that only came in last summer. I think. There's also then a conversation around Jacko. Obviously, if Jacko is still still here, but obviously we don't quite know what the situation is there. Would you be surprised, or what are your thoughts on it being Ethan?
Rahim.
Yes.
If he's still here, he would. Yeah, I think it would make sense. Yeah. It'd be another indication of his status within the squad, wouldn't it? But I think with the question marks maybe over, we all know at some point Ethan Rahim is going to be playing in the Championship. It's just when and who for, isn't it? Is it for us? So that's what we all hope. Realistically, I think most of us expect him to grow quicker than we do. And I just think because everyone's happy with that situation, but everyone knows that is the situation. Yeah. Giving the captaincy to someone that it's almost inevitable that he will leave at some point in the not too distant future. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. But I'm not there to make those sort of decisions. I would be quite surprised if it wasn't Tendai. Of course, it could still be Pordy, couldn't it? He might sign a new deal and everyone's really happy.
Touch wood. That would very much make everybody happy. I echo the thoughts on Ethan. I think he's kind of been billed over the last 18 months as maybe the third choice captain, wasn't he? As it was kind of Pordy, Jacko, and then Ethan. I think now we've got a few more experienced heads in the squad, and we've maybe got a slightly different squad makeup than what we have done recently. Somebody like a Tendai, somebody like James Collins fits the profile of someone that I would be happy to have as my captain, but I don't really like giving the captaincy to someone who's only been here 6 months.
Yeah, agreed.
It's kind of just a little personal preference of mine. It's like how some clubs will give captaincy to a lone player. Just seems ludicrous to me.
I do not like that at all.
No. So little things like that to me just point to the fact that Tendai is probably the perfect captaincy replacement in the summer. Again, hopefully we don't have to have that discussion again. And Pordy signs a new contract and that's announced this week and we're all absolutely buzzing. Oh, we can dream, can't we? We can dream, Chris.
Indeed.
That very much wraps up everything that we wanted to talk about today on the podcast. Was there anything else that you wanted to add at all, Chris?
Just a reminder, it's a fans forum on Thursday.
There is.
Yes, that will be interesting. So we're hoping to record Wednesday evening this week. Of course, life sometimes means that we can't, but we're hoping to, so that we can kind of preview that a little bit. And obviously means that someone from the Stacey West can then go and attend without having to worry about recording a podcast. And then we can report back afterwards. So yeah, but that's worth going to, guys. The last one was really good. I had avoided fans forums for quite some time. Didn't feel they were really for me, but went to the last one and it was really genuinely worthwhile. So if you can get there, it's probably worth filling your Thursday evening with if you can. Yeah, I really want to echo that. It's probably the best couple of hours that you'll spend in Sinsel Bank this season. But
say that as though it's high praise at the minute. But no, it is a great opportunity to really understand what goes on with everything around the club. And also on top of that, then Jez has is doing a live talk up at the EPCs. I think he's doing a couple actually. Again, they are great events and always really worth going to. Myself and Chris have done a couple now, I think, haven't we? But they're really, really good. And he changes them each year as well based on the previous transfer windows. So even if you've done it before, do it again. It will be worth it. I believe you're going up to one of them, aren't you, Chris? So enjoy that. And those that do choose to go to the fans forum, enjoy it, report back, let us know how it is. But that is everything from us, as I said. Okay, so enjoy the rest of your week. We will see you again on Wednesday. When I say we, it'll be a combination of a couple of us. It won't be me, actually, because obviously I've done the last couple. So until next time, however, up the imps.
Up the imps.